Welcome to another episode of Network Automation Heroes. Today, we're going to be talking about proactive and reactive configuration assurance with NetPicker. And I'm joined by Otto Coster. How are you doing, Otto?
Hi, all.
Otto, maybe, we know each other quite well. Maybe you could tell anyone who's listening a little bit about your background, how you ended up with working with NetPicker and Slurpit and the other tools over there.
Yeah, sure. I'm working for a company called NetIce, which has been around for more than 10 years, always in the network automation, network compliance space. And we're actually building a new product for the last year or so called NetPicker. And I'm the product lead and software developer for this product. It's a product that we built with the lessons of the past of the NetIce product. It does kind of the same thing, network compliance checking, network config backups, but in a new way. It's all fully Python based. I think you have a slide for that, Mark, in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, we try to modernize the architecture and also make it more accessible for both NetDev engineers and, you could say regular network engineers. Yeah, that's about it. I'm from Holland. We are a fully remote company, so we have colleagues in Portugal and India, and we're doing everything via Zoom. So very used to these kind of sessions.
Good. And I believe that you and I have kind of similar backgrounds. We're not originally network engineers. We came more out of the software side. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not a network engineer at all. I've learned a lot about networking in the past year, to be honest. But no, I'm just software developer. So mainly focused for the product. Yeah.
That's great. And Otto mentioned that he's Dutch. I lived in the Netherlands for a while, so sometimes Otto lets me practice my very bad Dutch on him, but we're not going to do any of that today. So to set the scene, I want to talk about what kind of problems we're seeing in the market that a tool like NetPicker can help with. And I'm trying to do this in all these videos rather than jump straight into what is the tool and what can it do? I'm going to start from the top down a little bit and have a look at some of the problems that we're experiencing. And then we'll take a closer look at NetPicker and hear more about the history there later on. So the first one I wanted to bring up, I think, is sort of near and dear to your heart, Otto. What we see is, the numbers tell the story over here on the right. Security and networking teams need to work together much more increasingly. There's a recent survey from Enterprise Management Associates that showed a couple of trends that I want to touch on. So one of them is that networking security teams are being merged. We see 86% increase in collaboration between networking security teams. And one of the things that's happening here is as networking teams are starting to automate, they're basically pushing changes out to the network a lot faster. And this is putting strain on some of the existing processes that the networking teams and the security teams use to be able to stay in lockstep with each other. Now, we're going to get into some of the specific use cases for this in a minute, but Otto, I'm curious to hear what you're seeing on the NetPicker side with regards to this.
Yeah. We see that we have two there's two topics that are really interesting here. One is that I think network engineers have always been aware of security risks, but we see increased pressure on this also from a compliance perspective and professionalization of organizations, that security leaks are coming out every day, and especially CVEs, the vulnerabilities that you need to be in control of the vulnerabilities of your devices. So that's why NetPicker provides this option to check for security vulnerabilities, so that you at least know that you're in control of your network. This has been I think an emerging risk in the last years, so very important.
So the second problem we're looking at is pushing changes to the network. The numbers over on the right tell the story. So 2% of manual network changes result in error. Now that sounds small, but as you're starting to do a lot of changes, that can add up very quickly. We also see 65% of changes are still performed manually. But for the people who are doing automated tests, the new data that's out is that only 11% of them apply pre-change validation to 100% of the changes. Does this sound right?
Well, I think in software development, the numbers are even higher. As developers, we aim to automate most of our work in order to eliminate this manual change error risk. So I wouldn't be surprised if 2% is not is even lower than in software development space, to be honest.
Right. So it's a problem across the board. And what we're going to look at today is kind of controlling those two types of risks. So we can find out that there are already vulnerabilities or issues on the devices that are on our network. What we'll also talk about is how can we stop them getting in there in the first place. So I want to jump now to introducing NetPicker, the tool. Maybe instead of me reading off the slides, you could just kind of give us a run through here since you're leading the product charge over there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I already mentioned NetPicker is fully Python based. This is because when you can do compliance checking for your network with a lot of products, but once you get into the more advanced use cases, you cannot do without a proper scripting language or programming language. So that's why we built NetPicker from the ground up based on Python, so that we can cater to like advanced use cases and also net dev engineers who have a lot of experience with Python, because it's very popular in the network automation space I've seen. But we made NetPicker on top of it in order to give network engineers who don't have a lot of coding experience a UI and like the same advanced features as a net dev engineer usually has with his own tools. So we provide two types of tests, Python tests and GUI tests, and they are compatible. Underwater, it's all Python, so you can use them interchangeably. And we thought about what are the good use cases for a NetPicker. So we provide a sys hardening library for at least Cisco out of the box with NetPicker, which you can use to quickly check your Cisco devices for the best practices. And we provide some example CVE checks. Like I said before, it's getting more and more important to be in control and to know which of your devices are vulnerable or are compliant. So that's why we provide some example CVE checks that you can easily extend or duplicate and update yourself to check your devices, for example, Juniper devices, Cisco devices, but also just Linux or semi-Linux devices to check for the presence of common vulnerabilities.
That's great. And earlier you mentioned that the sort of design philosophy behind NetPicker is based on 10 years of knowledge from NetIce. Alongside NetPicker, we've also seen a similar kind of approach taken with your sister tool, Slurpit. Maybe you could tell us about some of those learnings and this new approach you're taking with multiple sort of specific tools.
Yeah, NetIce, the old product, is still in production today, and we have clients still using it happily. But it was meant as a complete suite of products. So it could do everything. It could do config backup. It could do inventory management. It could do automation, compliance checking. But for most companies, we notice that they don't want everything. They don't want to have a complete suite. So they are looking for specific solutions, for example, for network data collection, which is our Slurpit product is designed for, which does one thing very well instead of trying to do everything to a certain level. Mm-hmm. And NetPicker was meant as for in the assurance, in the compliance validation goal.
That makes sense. So we're going to take a look at the tool itself now, and we're going to use a demo to do that. Let me just introduce this sort of scenario for the demo so you can get in the zone. So imagine you're a networking team and our security people would like to know if there are compliance issues in our running configs. Possibly we're pushing out a lot more of them than we used to because we're automating now. And our existing processes are, we've got to go and SSH into all the devices or run some sort of script, pull this stuff and do manual reporting. And we're looking to make that easier so we can keep going quicker. We've decided for this specific demo that the access for our TTYs has to be only SSH for all of our configs. And we're going to look at a simple lab where we have a Cisco device running. And we're going to use some of NetPicker's features to be able to back up those configs and run tests against them. What we want to do in those configs, in those tests, is we want to be able to see quickly, are these compliant or not? And then we can apply changes to see that they are now within compliance again. So I'm going to flip over to first, just explaining the setup a little bit. So we have a single device in NetBox here. It's a router. It's a Cisco device with an IP address. There's not a lot more in it. And what we've done is we've pushed this to a lab using Container Lab. So if these videos are going out in order, you will have already seen the video that we did with Roman from Container Lab and Alex from NRX the other day, showing how we can easily create labs from NetBox inventory so that we can test against them. But today we're just using this to give us an example device that we can test against. I just want to show the Container Lab website here for a minute. I've fallen in love with Container Lab compared to some of the other approaches. Otto, I believe you are also a big fan now.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I tried it this morning, and yeah, within half an hour, I had my. I think there's also a Nokia image for a router that is being freely available from their website. So you can just like within half an hour, you have a network set up. It's like a test lab, and integrated with NetPicker. So yeah, really easy to use.
Great. So I'm just going to show behind the scenes a little bit, just so you can see what we're using as our live network here. So we have a very simple lab set up in Container Lab, which just sets up a single node using this CSR image, and we push a default configuration to it. We're going to look at that configuration a little bit more later on. There is one additional step, which is that we need to ask it to work inside the NetPicker network this time. The reason why is because we're using Docker Compose to run NetPicker. So we need to make sure that they're both accessible to us, but otherwise that won't be important.
Yeah, this is, by the way, not necessary if you have real devices, but since these Container Lab images also run as a container, you need to specify that they are on the same network as NetPicker.
Exactly. So now let's have a look at NetPicker itself. First, maybe let's just jump into this view. So I'll just go right up to the dashboard. And maybe, Otto, you could just kind of talk us through the high level here.
Yeah, yeah, we provide the dashboard, of course. This is mainly useful if you have a lot of devices and you do a lot of testing with it. Currently, we only have one device and a couple of policies. It doesn't give you that much information, but the idea is that if you have a production network in here, you can just come into the dashboard, see which devices have been backed up recently, and also, more importantly, actually on the bottom right, which tests have failed for your network, so you can take immediate action if you see something happening there.
Perfect. So what we're going to do is just show how we make NetPicker aware of our devices. Now, fortunately for us NetBox users, this is already built in. So we can discover devices from NetBox in here, and we've already gone ahead and done that. So we've pulled through the same device that you saw over here. All it requires is your URL to the API and then your access token. And from there, you can pull through all the details of all the devices you need. And I believe you could do this on a continual basis, right? Like as the inventory is being updated in NetBox and people are adding more devices, you can set that up so that it can be updated here as well. So we're running against the latest version.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So the test we wanted to do, we have a running device here. We can see actually down here, that we can SSH into this device, and it's running just like it would elsewhere. So now, maybe Otto, you can talk us through kind of the logical process here. So we've got the concept of backups from the devices. We've also got the concept of policies or tests. Maybe we start with the backups.
Yeah, so by default, if you add a new device to a NetPicker, it won't make a backup yet. So you have to set that up. You can do that via a manual way. Yeah, Mark, if you could click the device here.
Yeah.
There's an option button to start a config backup. That works well for testing. For more devices than one, we provide a scheduler, which is back in the devices section where you can set up periodic backup. This is actually done via a cron job in the background, so you can specify exactly when you want it to happen. For example, at night or when the network is not that heavily used. Once you've got these backups set up, it will make backups, and it will also run the tests on those backups. And we'll come to the test later, but you can see here that we already did some testing before we started recording this webinar, and you will have a list of the configs, including the size, so you can quickly see if something has changed. And then the test results. And these are the test results actually of the built-in sys hardening library that we already provide with NetPicker. And tests are grouped in severity levels, but we'll come to that later. Mark, it would be interesting, I think, if you could show the latest configuration backup, and then we can explain a little bit on what it does.
Yeah. So I think we're still waiting for that to come through.
Yeah. Doing the backups takes a couple of minutes.
Maybe what we could do in the meantime is have a look at some of these existing tests that you ship built in.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, then you have to go to the policy section, and you'll find two folders there.
Yeah.
So one is sys and one is CVE. And the sys folder contains Cisco hardening tests for, you see, iOS and Cisco Wireless. And if you click Cisco iOS, then you will see these are actually sections coming from the Cisco website itself. So we converted the advice of Cisco into Python tests. For example, click this first one, and then you will see a lot of rules in there, which are applicable for Cisco iOS and Cisco iOS XE. And this one, for example, this makes sure, and bear with me, it's not that hard, even though you see some code in here, that certain lines are present in the device configuration. So here it checks for the AAA counting system to be present in your configuration. We'll come to that in more detail later. But this is nice to know that we provide some Cisco hardening already. So you can have some examples to get started with NetPicker.
Right, and we're going to actually make one of our own tests in a minute, so you can see how easy that is. So let's go back to the backups and see if our backup is complete yet. It looks like it is.
Yeah, you can open it and you will see your device configuration. And next to that, there's also a tab which is called Command Output. And this will actually, when doing the backup, we also store the output of certain show commands that are used in your tests. And this is done because we have two runs. One is the backup run where we store all the information, and one is the test run where we run the Python unit test against this configuration and output. And we split this in two because of speed. So you can do Python unit tests. The running of Python unit test is very fast. So if you have all the data already being backed up, then you can do like thousands of tests a minute. So in terms of speed, this is a real advantage if you cache the data. We also provide a way to do real-time show commands, but we will show that later. So we have both options here.
Great. So we now have our backup. So just to back up a little bit, we imported our device from NetBox here. We set up a backup for that device and kicked it off. and we can now see all the output of the device that's being run. So we're now in a position where we know something about the device that's running. What's next?
Yeah, I think we need to look at the vulnerability in your configuration, right?
I think we do. So let's go back to the description here. So we've decided that we want access devices to be limited to SSH. So when we set up our lab, we had a default config, and I can show you that here. And then here we can see that actually transport input all is defined for VTY 0, 1, 2, and 4. So what we're going to do, rather than having to check this or find out when it's too late in production, we're going to set up a test to tell us whether or not this is present, so that when it fails, we know to take some action. So maybe you could talk me through how we create a new policy to check for something like that.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, if you go to the policy section, there you can create a new policy. And a policy is actually just a group of tests. And underwater, this is all stored in a Git repository, so as files, so you can access them yeah, via your own editor as well. Yeah,
Okay.
this is the rules overview. So if you could
Yeah.
go ahead, Mark, and create a rule here. And we'll
Yeah.
start off with a simple rule, which is a GUI-based rule. And this might be useful for yeah, for simple tests like we're now building. Yeah, you have to select the platform here, which should match the device that you're testing against. And I think for severity, we could maybe increase it to high here, since our security department indicated that this is a high risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and indeed for type, we should select a simple rule here, because we wanna show you the most simple way to create a test.
Great. Okay, so we've got that. Now we're given a lot of options for how this test should actually function.
Yeah. So you can test by default. You test against the device configuration. So this is the type dropdown you see here. You can also specify a different option here to test against the show command output. And this is the pre-cached the backed up version of the show command output. But for this use case, yeah, we should actually check that this line, this transport all, is not present in the configuration.
Yeah.
So therefore, we provide the option to invert the text. So if you could click that, Mark, yeah, then you see then the description changes to must not include the text. And the nice thing about NetBook is that we built a live debugging functionality. So you can select a device from the dropdown, and this matches the platform of the test. And then yeah, I think if you now click debug, it would actually result in a failing test.
And there we go.
Yeah. So if you scroll a little bit down, you see literally a Python unit test error, and also in the trace section you will see the underlying Python code that is being constructed because of this text. So this looks good. If you could save the test, Mark.
Yeah.
Now it will actually run only these tests, and this will take a while again. But it will update the results for this device that we have put in NetPicker, and it will give the results of the test in a minute.
So obviously, if you have thousands of these devices, running these is very time saving, but because we're in a demo, we're just going to use the live debugging to show you how we would fix this. So if we have a look at our specific rule in here, we can see that we're looking for transport input all to not be in the config of the device. So we can show this failing. And then we would see this in our results, and we would be able to go and remedy that. And we'll talk a little bit about doing this before we push things to devices or before we log into them in a minute. But first, let's just go and fix them live. So if we come over here to our running device and SSH in, we can now fix those specific lines and lock them down so that they are only SSH. So this should be this, transport input SSH. And then let's do the same for 1. And then let's do the same for 2 and 4. Great. So now we have been alerted that our test is failing. So the security policy that was set by security has failed and it has notified us. We know what it is because, as you saw earlier, we can go and look at the diffs between the configs, so we can see something's failed. This is the area that it's failed, so it allows us to zoom in on that very quickly. And then we can save this running config to the device. Right. So now that we've fixed that in the device, we want to go and back up that device again, which we can see here. And this will now start and run the commands that you saw earlier to pull all the information from the device and put it into a backup. And then we can use the debug mode to check that our test is now passing. Okay, so we now have our new backup. If we go back to the policies and use debug mode, we should now see that because of the changes we made to the running config, the test will now pass. So we can select that we're running this against this device on this platform. And now if we hit debug, we see that it's compliant. So that's great. So to revisit the whole path there, we defined a rule which stated that if we find transport input all in our config, we should fail. We saw that it was failing. We fixed it on the device, took another backup and ran the tests again, and we now see that it's passing. So obviously we've taken some shortcuts here a little bit using the debug mode because it makes it a bit quicker for demoing. But you can imagine that once you're running hundreds or thousands of devices, using the cron job to do this automatically at a certain time per day, so that, as Otto said earlier, you wake up to a notification about all of the issues you're going to go and fix for the day, could be incredibly useful. What are we going to look at next?
I think it's time that we dive into the Python code, Mark.
Okay. Tell me where to go.
Yeah, so you could create a new rule in this same policy and then select type Python. And you would get a sneak preview of the Python that's being run under the hood.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, like this. So this needs a little bit of explanation on what it's actually doing. In essence, it's just a Python unit test. So we assert that something is happening, and then based on the outcome of the assertion, we either fail or let the test succeed. But we provide some extra parameters here to make life a little bit easier as a network engineer. So by default, we provide the device configuration. On line 6, you can see it here. And we provide the commands that you have defined in line 4. That's is now commented out. But there you can, define any commands that need to be prefetched. So when doing the backup, you can store the output of show version, for example. This is again for speed, so you can do the backup run and the test run separately, so that the test run can go really fast. So once you've got that data in there, you can assert that some text is present in the configuration or in the commands output. Yeah, this is the most simple version of a test, but you can, since it's Python, you can use any Python code that you would normally write. So you can do loops, you can do lists, you can do dictionaries, you can even access other systems. If other systems provide an API like NetBox, you can use the NetBox SDK for that. And the last thing that we provide is a device parameter that's listed in line 9, where we provide some extra methods for, like device.cli, and this will actually do a real-time command execution. So if you have that activated, then you can use real-time command output in your test. So this will make your test a little bit slower, of course, because it needs to connect to the device via SSH, run the commands, retrieve the data again. But this is useful if you have a test that's really depending on, for example, timing data or heavily changing data. So you can test always against the most recent device output.
Yeah, and so a lot of options here. We saw the simple version of a rule. We've seen how underneath it's all just Python, and in here I believe this is just PyTest, right? So I can kind of do whatever I want, and the result of the assert is what will be reported back to NetPicker.
Yeah, and
So
if you can uncomment this line, Mark, we can show it in action. And then we can show that actually you will also see in the debugging functionality the output of these CLI commands. So if you could select a device on the left here, and then click debug again, you will see well, the assertion I think will fail because the text is not, the word text is not present in the configuration. But
yeah.
you will see as well the show version output on the left. Yeah, so you have to comment out that line. So line 7, you have to comment out.
Yeah, this.
No, line 4 is fine.
Yeah.
Line 7 you need to comment out because it's now failing because that's not present. This
Got it.
just a placeholder.
Oops. Right.
Yeah, if you debug again. So especially while writing a test, this view is your friend. So you will see the output here. And the nice part is that we also support text FSM parsing here. So you could do, for example, show ARP. And maybe you can do that, Mark.
Sure.
So create, instead of show version, we run show ARP. Oh yeah, next to it, yeah, it's fine. And maybe you can comment out the version that we are not distracted by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this. And yeah, so you see on the left now, it actually shows you the raw data, so the raw text output.
So we can see how we can do pretty much anything we could do in a PyTest here. And I just want to, well, actually, maybe let's look at what's going on under the hood, because quickly editing things in the GUI here is useful. But actually, we can just do this all on the file system, right?
Yeah, if you could save this this rule, and there's an on the screen below this one, there's a clone button, and this will give you a command that you can run in your favorite editor, and it will clone the Git repository that's underlying. And then you can use VS Code or any other editor that you're familiar with to directly write the Python tests in your own editor.
So this is the local Git repository that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, we're exposing, since you're running it on local host, you can just connect to your local host and then and see the repository there.
And here we can see our test that we created. And then there we can see the Python itself. So we could edit these locally like we normally would in an IDE and then push them back up instead of using them. Yeah. So actually, we've kind of got the best of all worlds. We can create things in a simple approach. We can create things in Python in the GUI. But if we're really doing development and we want all of the advantages of our IDE, we can do that here as well, and then push them back up to the local Git repository within NetPicker, and it's all picked up there. Great. So let's just summarize, and then I want to look at one more use case. We have pulled our devices in from NetBox, which are also running in Container Lab, for example, this time. We set up a backup, which allows us to back up either on demand or on a cron job. And this obviously becomes more valuable as we have more devices. We can then create policies, which are folders of rules. And in this case, we saw a rule where we do not want the line, what was it again? Transport input all to be present. We saw how we can catch that against the backup, fix it, run the test again, and see that it's gone. But this is a sort of a reactive use case. I want to look at a proactive use case. So some of you will already be familiar with the network automation reference architecture that we use at NetBox Labs. But really what we've been looking at so far is this part of the loop where we're looking at the observed state, what's actually running in the network, to tell us that there are issues that we can then go and fix and push out again. But with NetPicker, we can also check for these issues before they go out. So for example, if instead of SSHing into our network devices and changing the policies there, we were updating something in NetBox and rendering them, what we could do in NetPicker in our code view is come in here and write any code we want, right? So we could actually just create like import PyNetBox, create a connection to NetBox with our URL and our token. And then from there, we could either pull the inventory into something like Ansible and create our configs there before they go out to the devices, or we could use NetBox's config templates to do that. And this way, we're running the tests proactively in the automation before they're pushed to devices. So this means this, like we're limiting the ways that errors can get into the system.
You want to show more in detail about which data is available?
Yeah.
Maybe it's good to show the GitHub for the PyNetBox, that if people are not familiar with it, that they can use it.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. If you're not familiar with PyNetBox, this is a Python library that you can use to interact with NetBox with the API. It has a huge number of people using it, as updated by the community very well. All the instructions are in here, and it also has an entire docs page that you can use to understand all of the objects that are available to you. Because the NetBox community is so large, you'll also find a ton of examples of blogs online of other people who've done work with this. And I think what might be fun for a future video is for us to come back and show an example of that working, where we make a change, we notice something, we make a change in NetBox, which makes a change to a config. We generate that and we check it with NetPicker before we push it out to the network, so that we're stopping that source of errors there. Great. Okay. So we've covered a lot. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight in NetPicker?
I think it's important to mention that NetPicker, you can download it for free. We have a free license which can make unlimited backups of unlimited devices. And for running the tests, we support 10 devices in the free version. If you want to run tests or have test results for more than 10 devices, we offer some kind of options. There's if you go to the pricing page, Mark, I don't want to make it this too commercial, but it's, I think, good to show that we offer a starter package which includes some Zoom sessions for consulting. We know that especially if you're not familiar with network compliance or network validation, that it needs some training to get used to what you can test, what you can actually do with NetPicker. If you're already really familiar with it, then I think you will love the power of Python. You can finally use Python in combination with an enterprise reporting tool. So yeah, then you're looking more at the professional version. I have to say this software is still being actively developed. Maybe you saw some minor issues in the UI. We are very much open to feedback on our product. I'm actively working on this myself with my colleagues. So we are happy to get feedback from users and help you out if something doesn't work for your network setup.
That's great. Thanks, Otto. Maybe just one question on that. What could you give us any clues as to things that are on the roadmap or things that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, we are now heavily investing on integrating with other systems via webhooks, via automatic support, for example, for the PyNetBox library. So that, yeah, we provide, in development terms, we call this batteries included. So that you don't have to import everything yourself, but for example, the PyNetBox is already, there's an object already present in each test that you can just easily use to get, because yeah, NetBox contains a lot of data about your network that you can easily compare against the actual state and then report on that. So that's really useful. In the future, we want to move towards more the automation part. We have to still specify how to do this exactly and which open source technology we're going to use. We're thinking about Ansible to do more like job-based automation, but that's coming in the future. So yeah, interesting.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that, Otto. We got through it, and I think we showed a lot of really useful use cases. I think I will chase you up on the idea of doing a follow-up video where we can look at generating configs and testing them ahead of time. But for now, that's all we got time for. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.